The city of St. Louis is getting a new mayor for the first time in 16 years, and voters aren't lacking for choices. There's a total of 12 candidates. 7 are running as Democrats in the primary, and conventional wisdom says that is where the race will be decided, since it's been about 7 decades since the city has had a Republican mayor. Tonight, who's leading this race? We'll parse the platforms of the frontrunners, and we'll talk about what does the city's mayor mean for the region. Stay tuned. Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. All right, let me do some introductions and we'll dive right in. All coming back to the show, or two back to the show and 1 new guest back to the show. I'm sorry. All coming back to the show, I apologize. Dave Robertson, we're off to a great start, Dave. If you'd like to take over, I know you could handle it better than me. The chair of the Political Science Department, University of Missouri, St. Louis. Also, Joe Manis, political reporter, St. Louis Public Radio, and Karan Otto, St. Louis City Hall reporter, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Thanks all for being here. Okay, so we have some new polls that have just come out by the Missouri Times. Leading this poll, Lyda Crewson at 33%, Lewis Reed at 17%, Antonio French at 15%, Tashara Jones at 15% undecided. These have been coming out every so often here. Last week, I think Tashara Jones was in 2nd place. Do you give any weight to these polls? How accurate do you think they are?
Well, with all due respect to my friends at the Times, I don't put much credence in these because I think, especially in a primary, an open primary, where many Republicans are suspected to probably vote as Democrats, it's difficult to poll a model like that. So maybe it'll turn out to be right, but I think there's enough risks in it that it depends, like whether or not they got enough people who said they were going to turn out, whether or not how big their sample size was. But again, like if you have a large Republican turnout who take Democratic ballots, it can throw things off. So I think that's my cautionary tale here.
Can you put enough into it to say that Ms. Crewson is the leader, regardless of how accurate the rest of it is?
I'd be reluctant to say that, but I think it would confirm a sense that she had a lot of advantages going into this election, and
money.
Money is part of it. She is the only really prominent and well-known white Democrat in this race. There are several Republicans who are well-known, who are contesting this, who are likely to divide up the African-American vote.
Well, let's talk about that right there. And I hate that this is even a thing, but I guess it is a thing.
It is a thing.
It is a thing.
It's true.
We've got multiple black candidates who are going to split the black vote and then lie to.
Right.
Is that what people are concerned about?
Absolutely. And right now you have a lot of the candidates thinking, this is their time, this is their shot. So right now, there's a sense that the black community should have come together and picked one candidate, but each of the candidate feels like they're the person and they're the best one. So what you have right there is a logjam.
And I guess as long as there are a lot of folks in the race, it could be your time with what, barely double-digit percentages of the vote, perhaps. I mean, you could win with 15, 20% of the vote.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure. I mean, it's going to come down to turnout, people getting out the vote. You have a couple of the North Side candidates. I think it's really going to come down to getting their wards and their neighboring wards out there. But yeah, I mean, you could see a candidate, win this election with far less than 50% of the vote.
Okay. Yeah, I would think that the winner will come ahead of 20%, but still, it's going to be surprisingly close down line, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a couple factors. Tashara Jones, in particular, the city treasurer, I think she's counting on a large young population coming out, black and white, multicultural, coming out for her. And I think in some ways she's casting herself, we're using a little presidential, is a little bit of the Barack Obama thing, that she gets a lot of jazz at the forums, a lot of Young people are very enthused about her. So her camp is hoping that this will pay off, and so that it won't be just a racial split, which is the traditional thing, and unfortunately in St. Louis city politics. And so some say that there's more of a generational change this time, that if you have a lot of young people turn out, it could make a difference. Because there have been several recent elections in the city, small ones, state rep and others, where one of the African American candidates did win, despite the fact that there were several African Americans and maybe only one white. So it's not unheard of in recent times in the city for the race to be less of a factor. And I think many of the candidates are banking on it a little bit this time.
So if she's going younger, what about Antonio French? Doesn't he have like a bajillion followers on Twitter?
Yeah, but most of them don't live here. He's got 140,000 followers on Twitter, but most of them are not St. Louis residents.
He made his fame in Ferguson.
Yes, but on the other hand, he got a very significant endorsement this weekend from the Post-Dispatch. And that could help him again with some of the same young people who also that Jones is hoping to attract. So, and French has a very interesting, detailed story. His wife is Bosnian, so he's been reaching out to some of the other communities in town. So there's a lot of little different factors that could influence things. And even the endorsements are split. I mean, Aldermanic President Lewis Reed has the congressman, Lacey Clay. You've got the mayor who's going with Cruson. You've got a couple former mayors with Cruson. But you have the former Secretary of State, Jason Kander, who's gone with Tashara Jones.
And I think Jennifer Joyce, the former circuit attorney today, went with Antonio French.
Right.
Right. She had been hinting that she was going to go with one, either French or Jones or one of those. So I think that it's unclear how much endorsements play. But if you have some, if they're split up, then it really you're not sure if how much influence at all. Sometimes if all the endorsements are going one way, it can kind of set a momentum. But I mean, I will say this, some people say, okay, Cruson may be somewhat inevitable. We've had in the last few months, an inevitable woman with a lot of experience at the top of the ticket who didn't win because of, the campaign was not, the turnout and the campaign were not what people thought. So I would not assume anything.
Many of us are very reluctant to make predictions at this point
after
November.
Last
year. Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, going with the parallels, I think I saw a bumper sticker that says, "I'm with Lyda," as in I'm with her. So there's a lot of, maybe a few parallels. And we've never had a female mayor, is that correct, in the city of St. Louis?
Correct.
Do you make much of these endorsements? Does that matter to the folks, do you think?
Well, I think in Tashara Jones's case, I mean, that's really been her campaign strategy so far. I mean, she has some money, but she hasn't really been spending it on, TV ads, and so she's really been focused on building this broad coalition of these young voters, and I think that she's gotten some momentum from that. And Antonio French with the editorial board's endorsement, I mean, he's really been taking advantage of that, and he's been using it in his advertising, and you wouldn't normally think that those are the Post-Dispatch editorial board endorsement would help him and the voters that he's trying to attract.
Did it surprise you they endorsed him?
I can't say that I'm surprised. I was intrigued by it, yeah.
And then Tashara shunned your editorial board.
Absolutely, she wrote a pretty scathing letter, attacking editorial board editor Todd Robertson, calling him out of touch, and she made hay out of it. I mean, it really propelled her, in some ways, social media and nationally, she got a lot of attention for it.
Okay, before we go any further, can we establish there are a couple other front runners here? We're talking so far. We've talked about Lyda Cruson, Antonio French, Tashara Jones. Someone mentioned Lewis Reed. Does Mr. Boyd fit into the top running? How would you characterize the front runners that have a legitimate shot at running this?
He's at a disadvantage, is what I would say, because
Jeffrey
he
Boyd
is he's a more local candidate who has not won citywide, or does not have that 28th Ward cachet, or is not Antonio French, who has really a national following at this point.
28th Ward being Lyda Cruson's ward, Central West End.
Yeah. Sorry, 20.
No, No, yeah, no, I was just filling in the holes.
Yeah,
there a
yeah,
little bit.
sorry.
So I think, I think that, Boyd does have, he has tried to appeal to some fellow military veterans, and he is a respected alderman. He ran for city treasurer a few years ago, lost to Jones in this very combative four-way primary. This was in 2012. So I think Boyd is a serious candidate,
Yes.
and he has serious stances, but I think in this crowded field, so far, like, he hasn't gotten any of the major endorsements. He's had some trouble raising the money, and you need the money at the end to run ads. So especially, again, when you don't know who's turning out.
And when you've got, apparently, again, whether or not, how much we put into the poll, but 15% still undecided.
Right.
In the last few days, those
Right.
ads can make a difference. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
And back to the endorsements, Francis Slay coming out and endorsing Lyda Cruson and actually going out there and raising money for her. I think, yeah, that's pretty significant. She already had a pretty large lead as far as money, and Francis, the mayor, is extending that lead for her.
Yeah, he's obviously proven that he knows how to win in this town.
Well, and he's been hinting that he's going to do some, I interviewed him like a week ago, and he's been hinting that he may do some last minute, more higher profile things for her during the final days. So whether, I don't know if it's robocalls, if it's him going to, he's already in some ads, but whether or not it's higher profile, what exactly he might do. But yeah, he still has some sway. He's a very smart political man, and in some ways, because he's not running for a fifth term, and while there are some controversies, he hasn't had a huge, there's no reason for anyone not to want his endorsement, not to want his support. So from that standpoint, he could play a key role for her. And again, he could be signaling to Republicans, without saying it, don't vote in that other little primary with these people who you don't know and who won't end up in City Hall, come across for her. So it's going to be intriguing to see what happens.
The risk in this is that Slay's endorsement and Cruson generally is seen as a stay-the-course candidate,
Yes.
like that national candidate, Hillary Clinton, and that could be a drag in an election where there's a lot of people saying we need change, and they're getting traction for that.
We need change because that's just kind of the atmosphere that the whole country, including the city, is in, or because it's been, forget 8 years, it's been 16 years with one particular candidate.
It's that, it's the mood of the country, and it's the crime issue, which is a serious problem for people.
Yeah, now I think Cruson, and she says this is because it always has been a key issue for her. Cruson has really been focusing on the crime issue. Less so much in some of her ads, but I'm assuming she's going to ramp that up in the next 10 days or so. But most of us have interviewed her, and I just finished doing a profile of her, and yeah, she's definitely highlighting crime. And while all the candidates are talking about it, she has a compelling backstory because, her husband was murdered.
She lost
22 years ago.
Shot and killed in their driveway. I believe.
Attempted carjacking. So while she doesn't bring it up, most of the veteran residents in the city know that. So I think while all the candidates have been addressing crime, in some ways I think it's been a more compelling issue when she talks about it.
The downside of that is that she can be associated with the sort of incumbent police administration
Right.
and Dotson, and there's lots of criticism of Dotson by the other candidates.
Yeah, if you're the new mayor coming in, you're sitting steady at 188 murders 2 years in a row, and if the public is looking for somebody to blame, if I'm the mayor, I'm not pointing the finger at myself, I'm
Yep.
pointing the finger at the police chief.
Yep.
And so it's going to be real interesting to see what happens with Sam Dotson. You have candidates saying that, day one, they're going to fire him. Now, whether or not that's actually going to happen, or if it's
Antonio
possible.
French has said that.
Absolutely.
He's backed off it just a little bit, it seems like. Lately, from day one, he'll take a look at the leadership of the police department, but nevertheless, he's said that for sure.
I think he said that Wednesday at the forum, where he said day one he would get rid of Sam Dotson. I believe Tashara Jones also said that. I know in the past she said that she would, do a national search for a new public safety director who was actually over the police chief. But at the forum on Wednesday, I believe she said that she would get rid of Dotson straight away.
stepping back from kind of the horse race of it all, are there distinguishing characteristics that between these candidates that voters should know about? I mean, gosh, I can't go through all 12 here, but do you see, even with the front runners, anyone standing out in any particular area or issue?
Public safety, like you mentioned, is pretty much the number one issue that the candidates are running on. You have Antonio French, who's really talking up, redeveloping the north side. I mean, outside of public safety, he's talking about redeveloping the north side. You have Tashara Jones, who's out there talking about, the racial equity lens and,
Right.
and make the city making
Every
decisions.
decision she wants to be made through that racial equity lens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which may help her as far as attracting support from African American, some African American voters, or even younger voters of any color. But it probably, I would predict, it might turn off some of the older voters in the city, fair or unfair. Older white voters in the city probably are feeling defensive. Just again, it reminds me a little bit of the November election. So it depends whether talk like that prompts them to energize to come out to vote for Cruzen. I mean, whether one agrees or disagrees with the reasons, just like in November, why some voters came out and were energized to vote for Trump for certain issues aside from what he was saying. The point is, I'm talking about the effect, whether when I agree or disagree,
Yeah.
it's the effect of what happens. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of this talk, if it energizes opposition as well as the people you're trying to reach.
Dave, if I live in St. Louis County or even St. Charles, Jefferson County, should I care about this race at all?
Well, sure. The leadership of St. Louis City is critically important to the economic health, the jobs, all the things people care about nationally and in our region. St. Louis City matters a whole lot to everybody in the region. The problem is it's a little hard to see differences between the candidates on an issue that's directly affecting people in St. Louis County, which is the merger of the city and county. I think the candidates are pretty wary of this generally, and there's not much room between them on this issue.
Well, Cruzen has come out in favor of it.
Yeah.
I mean, she supports it, but she said her big line is the city and the county got a divorce in 1876. They need to get remarried, but they need to get engaged first and sign a prenup. You know, the idea that they're going
Right.
to come out with some sort of agreement on what the terms
Yeah.
would be. One of the interesting things, though, about this election is that St. Louis County Executive Steve Stenger, excuse me, unless I've missed something, he is playing really low when it comes to the mayor's race. And I can remember just a few years ago where his predecessor, Charlie Dooley, did weigh in. You know, he did, endorse Slay. Slay endorsed him. So there, for whatever reason, there's kind of this hands-off going on between the county officials and what's going on in the city.
Is there any chance, going back to the fact that we have so many Democrats and kind of conventional wisdom says that's where the race will be won, any maneuvering possibility, any likelihood that if a candidate comes out in second place in this primary, they could turn around and run as an independent in the general election? Have you heard anyone talk about that as even a possibility?
No, I haven't. But you do have two independents. Well, at least one. You have Larry Rice on the ballot. This is certainly a guy with a lot of money and a guy with some name recognition. So, he's an interesting guy. I think he's going to do his best to make that general election as interesting as possible. But no, I haven't heard about any of the Democratic candidates.
We do have another. Are you talking about the other candidate being Casey Cordes?
Right. There's a question of whether or not she's actually going to be on the ballot. It's a question with signatures. But yeah, she is the other one.
Who has a lot of the same politics as the folks in the Democratic primary, but she wants to run as an independent.
Could say she's running to the left of a lot of the candidates on the Democratic side.
And of course, there's a Green Party candidate and a Libertarian candidate
And
who
two
could pick
Republican
off,
candidates,
right, who could pick off some of those votes too in the general election. 1-2% maybe.
But I don't foresee, I could be wrong, but I don't foresee anything like 1981, showing my age here, but that was the last time we really had a really serious, prominent Republican, Jerry Wamser, who was a lawyer and well-respected, and who really, this was Vince Shamel. Shamel won the primary, defeating the incumbent mayor, Jim Conway. And then all of a sudden, Shamel found himself facing a guy roughly his age, and they had a really nasty battle over a month. And it was while Shamel won, Wamser had one of the best showings of a Republican.
So that was the last time we've seen a showing like that from a Republican in the general.
Yes, yes, yes.
Is this any way to run a democracy and pick a mayor for a major city, to where you could have all of this vote split and have it decided in the primary?
But yeah, well, it's been that way for ages. Now, I mean, Wamser, who unfortunately died a couple of years ago, he actually played a major role, behind the scenes role, in 1997 when Clarence Harmon, then the police chief, was challenging then incumbent Mayor Freeman Bosley in the Democratic primary. Wamser joined forces with a couple Democrats, and they were going around whipping up Republicans to get to the polls, take a Democratic ballot, and vote for Harmon. And that activity was largely credited with one of the reasons that Harmon won the primary in 1997 and knocked out Bosley.
But you know what I'm saying, Dave? Like, is it fair? Are voters getting a fair shake on this if they can't get a decent debate between two candidates in the general election that can actually have a shot? Each has a shot. If your two best candidates, let's say your three best candidates are in the primary, and then nothing happens in the general, well, we never really get to see people square off and kind of refine their ideas.
You know, we're not alone in that. In districts all over the country for the U.S. Congress, you know, there's really one party that's going to win. Hardly any.
But some cities do nonpartisan mayoral races as well, though.
Yeah.
Some.
Some.
I mean, it's more frequent in the smaller cities. Among the major cities, there aren't too many, but there are a few.
Corinne, what do you think? Let's go back to Mayor Slay for just a second. We just have a few minutes left. 16 years. That's the longest serving mayor, correct, in the city of St. Louis?
Yes, it is.
What's his legacy after he steps aside?
Well, what's interesting to me is, I mean, this is a guy who steps down after, he doesn't really have a lot of enemies. You know, you're a mayor for that long, you're going to make waves and you're going to have enemies. So I think it's pretty remarkable, his performance and the way he's been able to build coalitions and largely get his agenda through, that he hasn't made a lot of enemies. I mean, you certainly have, you know, people, you know, Lewis Reed and some others who don't get along with him. But I think he feels like he's going out on a high note. You have the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency relocating their western headquarters. You know, the half-cent sales tax to go towards Metrolink expansion was a big thing for him. I mean, I think you're going to see him coming out pretty strongly in favor of the soccer stadium, even though, you know, he had been saying it's not a priority. I think we're going to see a real push for him. You know, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint, you know, couple things, you know, over 16 years, but I mean, we could say he's been a pretty highly successful mayor.
You agree?
Yeah, I think to some degree. I think, unfortunately, the public safety concerns of the last couple of years, which may or may not, I mean, one doesn't necessarily pin it on the mayor, whoever's the mayor. But
he would say he only recently got control of the police department in the last couple of years.
Right, exactly. And some of it is a national phenomenon. I mean, it could have to do with demographics, younger people. I mean, you know, there's just a lot of things that play into a crime rate. But in effect, if you're the person who's mayor at the time, that can hurt your legacy a little bit, whether it's fair or not. But yeah, I mean, the mayor is going out. He hasn't had any major scandals when you think about it compared to some of his predecessors. So overall, yeah, I think he may not, when he leaves office, there may be debate over whether or not he had a vision, but I think that he was definitely someone who got things done.
He will be criticized for the state of some neighborhoods in North St. Louis.
Yes.
I mean, that's forever going to be a part of his record. I think he would say that, you know, he governed at a time when there was a pretty deep recession and there were some things that he would like to do, but I think that is absolutely going to be part of his legacy.
Right. Agreed.
People are not afraid to say, look at North St. Louis, look at South St. Louis. There's a big difference in in the quality of life and just the lack of empty lots versus empty lots.
But that's been a complaint, and a legitimate one, going back decades. I mean, decades, the late 70s even. I mean, there was a lot of debate, not just at City Hall, but members of Congress. Congressman Clay's father came under a lot of criticism, so that's something that it's a legitimate complaint. But there's a lot of people who have borne the blame over the last few years. Now, one of the things that I do want to mention is that the mayor can point to a revival of downtown as far as more people living downtown and some of the other developments that are either underway or have been done downtown to make downtown less of a ghost town and more of a real town.
That's a classic issue in cities, and it's not just St. Louis, Chicago, lots of other cities. Do you develop downtown and focus resources there, or do you spread out development in neighborhoods across the city? And generally, the downtowns have a way of winning this.
We've heard that from candidates, Antonio French, Jeffrey Boyd, a couple of, Tashara Jones, in Lida as well. They've all been saying that you got to invest in neighborhoods, not just the Central Corridor, even though that seems to be, to a lot of people, the Central Corridor has gotten all the action in recent time. Predictions?
No, I'm sworn off, but I would say that the four candidates we've talked about have an advantage in this, and so that's where I'd stop.
You're gun shy.
I am. After November, I sure am.
All right. Well, we have about 30 seconds, so I think we'll wrap it up. Unless you, Joe, I know you love a quick soundbite. Would you like to say anything in 22 seconds?
Okay, it all depends on the Republicans.
If they come and play in the Democratic primary.
If they come and play in Democratic primary.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Joe Manis, Karan Otto, and Dave Robertson, thank you all for being here. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.